Hello, dear Homopedia family. We often labor under the misconception that the soul of a Spanish hacienda lies solely in the heavy masonry of structural renovations, that, without tearing down walls to create authentic brick archways, we are doomed to exist within drywall boxes. This is a fundamental fallacy of construction over perception. The true essence of the Mediterranean aesthetic is not found in the permanence of the brick, but in the manipulation of geometry to soften the rigid linearity of modern architecture. We challenge the belief that history must be built. Instead, we propose that history can be simulated through optical depth. The modern apartment suffers from an acute sterility. Its corners are too sharp, its shadows too uniform, creating a spatial friction that leaves the inhabitant feeling unmoored and cold. This architectural rigidity agitates the psyche, stripping the home of its sanctuary status and reinforcing a sense of temporary existence. By deploying the arch hack, utilizing large-scale arched mirrors or painted trompe l'oeil features, we introduce the curvature of organic design, instantly dissolving the harsh boundaries. We resolve the conflict of the box by bending the light itself, inviting the warmth of the Iberian Peninsula into the most sterile of spaces. To begin the transformation, we must address the unseen hero of the hacienda style, the implied thickness of the walls. Modern drywall is thin and insubstantial, creating a hollow acoustic and visual flatness. We resolve this by painting a slightly darker shade inside the arch of our faux doorway or behind our arched mirror. This subtle gradient mimics the shadowing of thick adobe, tricking the eye into perceiving mass where there is none, instantly grounding the room in a sense of permanence. We encounter a significant spatial friction when dealing with standard window frames, which are almost universally rectangular and sharp. These openings slice the view into aggressive grids. Our solution is not to replace the window, but to soften the periphery. By installing curtain rods higher and wider than the frame, and using heavy linen drapes that pool on the floor, we create a soft, columnar effect that mimics the deep-set embrasures of a stone villa, muffling the harsh lines. Lighting in a hacienda is never ambiently uniform. It is a negotiation between deep shadow and warm highlights. The overhead recessed light is the enemy of atmosphere. We pivot to low-level lighting sources, wrought iron sconces, or table lamps with parchment shades. These cast pools of light that define intimate zones, replicating the effect of candlelight against plaster, rather than the clinical wash of LEDs that exposes every flaw in the drywall. The palette of the Spanish Revival is not merely a choice of color, but a resolution to the conflict of temperature. We avoid the cool grays that dominated the last decade as they create an emotional distance. Instead, we select colors that retain the memory of the sun: burnt sienna, warm ochre, and creamy stucco whites. These hues do not just sit on the wall. They radiate warmth back into the room, combating the psychological chill of modern construction. Texture acts as the bridge between the visual and the tactile. A flat painted wall offers no engagement to the hand or the eye. We introduce the atmospheric pivot of limewash or plaster effect paint. By applying this with a block brush in chaotic strokes, we create a surface that catches the light unevenly. This micro-texture breaks the monotony of the plane, giving the walls a weathered, living quality that feels accumulated over centuries rather than applied in an afternoon. The floor often presents a budget crisis, as installing authentic terracotta tiles is invasive and expensive. We solve this by utilizing large, natural fiber rugs, sisal or jute, to cover the synthetic sheen of laminate or vinyl. The coarse weave of these materials interrupts the visual slide of the floor, introducing a friction that slows down the eye and grounds the furniture, mimicking the rustic, earthy foundation of a hacienda courtyard. In terms of furniture, the unseen hero is the weight of the piece. Modern furniture is often lifted on thin legs to appear airy, but Hacienda style demands gravity. We select pieces that sit heavy on the floor-solid wood consoles or low-slung leather sofas. This weight provides a counterbalance to the verticality of the walls, anchoring the space and providing a sense of historical accumulation that flimsy flat-pack furniture cannot achieve. Ironwork is essential, but it must be used as a punctuation mark, not a sentence. We see many designs fail by overusing cheap, hollow metal. The resolution is to source vintage or heavy-gauge iron accents, a candlestick, a curtain rod, a door handle. The cold, hard touch of real iron contrasts with the warmth of the plaster and wood, creating a sensory dialogue that validates the authenticity of the aesthetic. The mirror is not just a reflective surface. It is an architectural intervention. When we place a large arched mirror opposite a window, we are not just checking our reflection. We are punching a hole in the wall. This virtual renovation doubles the natural light and extends the sight line, tricking the brain into perceiving a suite of rooms. It resolves the claustrophobia of the small footprint by borrowing the exterior world. We must also address the ceiling, often the most neglected plane in the room. In a true hacienda, beams would traverse the span. If installing faux beams is out of scope, we paint the ceiling a shade darker than the walls to lower the visual height and create intimacy. This spatial friction of a lower perceived ceiling creates a womb-like atmosphere, essential for the cozy, protected feeling of the style. Textiles must tell a story of use and wear. Pristine velvet or shiny polyester breaks the immersion. We opt for washed linens, heavy wools, and vintage kilims. These fabrics absorb light rather than reflecting it, contributing to the soft, muted atmosphere. The tactile roughness of a wool throw resolves the smoothness of the modern sofa, adding a layer of sensory complexity. Greenery in a hacienda is not decorative, it is structural. We use large-scale plants like olive trees or cacti to disrupt empty corners. The organic, irregular shapes of these plants fight against the grid of the room. Their shadows, cast against the limewash walls, become moving murals that change with the day, adding a dynamic, living element to the static architecture. The unseen hero of scent cannot be overlooked. The visual illusion falls apart if the room smells of synthetic cleaners. We introduce the olfactory notes of cedar, sage, and dried orange. This sensory layer bypasses the logical brain and speaks directly to the limbic system, solidifying the impression that we are in a sun-baked, earthen home, reinforcing the visual narrative we have constructed. Art in this aesthetic should be sparse but significant. We avoid the gallery wall of small, cluttered frames which creates visual noise. Instead, we choose one large, textural piece, perhaps a woven tapestry or a large abstract in earth tones. This single focal point resolves the visual chaos, providing a place for the eye to rest and mirroring the expansive, unadorned walls of traditional Spanish architecture. The transition between rooms offers a moment of friction in open-plan living. We define these zones not with walls, but with runners and area rugs that create islands of texture. This suggests a floor plan of distinct rooms without the need for vertical partitions, respecting the flow of modern living while imposing the compartmentalized intimacy of the past. We treat the bookshelf not as storage, but as a sculptural element. We arrange books and pottery with breathing room, allowing the negative space to be as important as the objects. This atmospheric pivot from clutter to curation mimics the museum-quality stillness of a historic home, where every object has a purpose and a place. The hardware on doors and cabinets is the handshake of the house. We replace standard chrome or brushed nickel with oil-rubbed bronze or matte black iron. This small tactile interaction occurs dozens of times a day. The cold, textured metal reinforces the hacienda narrative with every touch, resolving the cognitive dissonance of a modern door. To mimic the deep window sills of thick-walled homes, we place narrow console tables directly in front of windows. This creates a surface for display pottery, plants, lamps that visually extends the depth of the window. It is a spatial hack that adds layers to the perimeter of the room, pushing the wall inward and creating a sense of protective mass. We acknowledge this spatial friction of sharp wall corners and hallways. While we cannot round them structurally, we can soften them visually by placing a tall, round planter or a curved chair near the edge. This forces the path of travel to curve around the object, mimicking the circulation flow of a space with rounded architecture. The acoustics of a tiled hacienda are distinct, echoey, but warm. In a carpeted apartment, we lose this. We can reintroduce a level of acoustic brightness by using ceramic and glass accessories that reflect sound. balanced by the dampening of heavy drapes. This subtle audio tuning helps the room sound like a space filled with hard surfaces and history. We use the rule of 3 in accessorizing, but with a hacienda twist. Objects should vary in height and texture, not just color. A tall iron candlestick, a medium terracotta pot, and a low wooden bowl create a triangular composition that leads the eye. This mimics the irregular, accumulated nature of a home inhabited for generations. The atmospheric pivot of imperfections is crucial. We do not patch every ding in the wall or fix every scratch on the wood. We embrace wabi-sabi. These flaws add to the narrative of age. We frame these imperfections as patina rather than damage, resolving the anxiety of maintenance with the philosophy of acceptance. We can create the illusion of a courtyard or patio indoors by clustering plants near the brightest window and using a different rug texture, like a flat weave outdoor rug. This zones the area as a transition space between the indoors and the outdoors, capturing the spirit of the hacienda's connection to nature. The height of artwork is often hung too high in modern homes. We lower the arc to eye level when seated, which is traditional in older European homes with lower ceilings. This lowers the center of gravity in the room, making it feel more grounded and intimate, resolving the feeling of floating in a tall, empty volume. Finally, we address the entry. In a hacienda, the entry is a decompression zone. We establish this by placing a small bench and a mirror immediately inside the door. This creates a pause, a moment to transition from the chaotic exterior world to the sanctuary of the interior. It is a functional resolution that sets the emotional tone for the rest of the home. The impact of these design decisions extends beyond the visual. It fundamentally alters the way we inhabit the space. By resolving the friction between the sterility of the modern box and the human need for organic warmth, we create a home that holds us. The arch hack and its supporting elements are not merely decorative deceptions. They are psychological anchors that ground us in a sense of history and permanence, even if the lease is only for a year. We have proven that the Hacienda aesthetic is not reliant on the zip code or the era of construction, but on the intentional layering of texture, light, and geometry. We have turned the constraints of the renter's reality into a canvas for creativity, demonstrating that the most luxurious interiors are those that solve the problem of soullessness with the richness of illusion. The result is a space that feels excavated rather than decorated, a sanctuary of our own making.